I don't know. At this point, I'm starting to think this guy should just walk clean. He did less than what could have been done by protocol. He did something that he was trained to do. George Floyd looks like he could have died just standing there.
He was saying, I can't breathe while
No,
he was standing
I'm just
there.
saying, look at the guy, right? Look at the guy. The guy did not take care of himself. How old was he? He was probably on his way to dying anyway, right?
Well,
so I'm just saying, like, you just look at all the factors, you look at everything, and you're like, you know what? This guy's going to walk in a just society.
I'm not a fan of that argument because there's a lot of old people who don't deserve to die when Andrew Cuomo
I'm not
killed
saying he deserved to die, but I'm saying the guy committed a crime. He went through the process. The guy used less than forceful, all of the protocols that were available to him. That guy showed restraint.
It's true. It's
Chauvin
true.
showed restraint.
But hold on. I want to address that comment real quick. What I mean is, you said, George Floyd seemed like he was probably on his way to die. There are a lot of older people that were in nursing homes that were literally on their way to die, and Cuomo still killed them.
So 100%. Just because you're older and infirm doesn't mean you deserve to die. I don't know how that came out.
You said George Floyd was on his way to die anyway, and I'm like,
all right, but when you talk about the drugs, the heart condition, the methamphetamine, which is also a vasoconstrictor. He takes a respiratory depressant. He's got 90% constriction in his blood vessels already. That dude was trying to kill himself. He was killing himself
or
already.
Someone else. He was getting behind the wheel of a car.
Yes,
high
exactly.
on fentanyl.
And no, high on meth.
And meth.
I mean, this is the combination of the two behind the wheel of the car is.
Yikes.
It's not about himself. It's about the reckless endangerment to himself and others. And so the cops, they stopped him. And there was even the medical examiner today. They showed a picture of Floyd with the thing in his mouth. When the cop pulls him over, you can see something on his tongue. The judge even said it looked like a pill in September. And so he asked, what does that look like? Based on what we've heard already, it looks like he's swallowing pills.
Right. And we know that the state doesn't actually want to get to the bottom of this, right? Because if they really wanted to get to the bottom of this, they would be giving the drug dealer immunity to get the real details.
To get him on the stand, but they won't.
That's
exactly.
Right. So
the state could say, Maurice Lester Hall, the dealer,
They could promise him immunity.
you will be immune from prosecution if you testify, and they won't do it. Because as soon as this trial's over, they're going to file charges against him.
Well, as they should, which is actually something that I've been thinking about in terms of the calculus. It's like, we give this guy immunity. He can still go out there and sell drugs.
Yep.
George Floyd clearly was on drugs. All of these things we've just talked about. Maybe they don't want to burn their powder on that. I don't know. It's a thought. But like, given the social ramifications, the cultural, political ramifications of the verdict, this for the city, for the country, they really should be doing everything they can to get to the bottom of it, but they're not.
You know what I saw that I was no. Go ahead,
I just want to throw. Here's the thing, though. Even if they were able to come out and definitively prove that we know for a fact he OD'd, the officer in question is completely innocent, Chauvin didn't do anything wrong, I think there would still be riots.
Of course, there's.
So how much? Yeah. Exactly.
Right.
So,
Even if the facts were 1,000 to 0, there's still going to be riots.
If they took Derek Chauvin a day after this happened and the riots were breaking out, and they marched him to the top of a pyramid and grabbed his arms and legs and put him over the shrine and took a giant axe, they would still riot.
Yeah.
They would say, we're going to riot until the system changes. They would find a reason.
Honestly, they might have rioted even more. When you give a mob what they want, it doesn't exactly
That's what I'm thinking
incentivize
about.
them.
Like
Right.
doing nothing right now is like a fire, a blaze that's burning through the fields, and you're not going to do anything. You're just going to let it keep burning. But pariahing this guy is like pouring gasoline on the fire to try and put it out.
You constantly reignite the tensions in the story and exacerbate things.
Yeah. So there's other ways to put out a fire. You can burn the land around the fire. You can fix the system itself so it doesn't continue. But
If after this incident they said we will not be charging any of these officers, you'd have had the same riots. They would have ended, and there would be no more news this year. By charging him, he is going to get acquitted on many of these charges because they're insane, and they're going to reignite the anger.
Yep.
I'll tell you something, though. I want to mention this. I don't know if the defense are masters playing 4D, even 5D chess. Maybe they're just slipping on banana peels and then pulling off backflips.
Yes.
That's the joke. Like
Very possible.
instead of slipping and falling down, you go, whoop, land perfectly.
I
So
meant to do that.
So right. So here's the defense, right? The defense brings on this cop who pulled over Floyd in 2019. And he's like, let's show the body camera footage from what happened. And in this body camera footage, the cop is cussing at Floyd, kind of yelling. And I'm like, wow, this is like, doesn't look good for this cop.
Yeah.
George Floyd is like, I'm trying, man. I don't understand. And then you can hear one of the other cops yell, spit it out, spit it out.
Yep.
He takes Floyd out of the vehicle, cusses him, and then the body camera footage stops. And I was like, what was the point of watching that? Then the prosecution starts. And because he's like, no further questions. The prosecution steps up and says, did George Floyd faint? No. Did he fall down? No. Did he need to go to the hospital? No. Was he okay? And then they're like, George Floyd in this instance, was panicking, saying, I can't breathe, but he didn't die. He didn't, he wasn't killed. So clearly, in the same circumstance, he was fine. And that was the setup, because the narrative now is that the prosecution basically stated George Floyd in the past has feigned medical emergency to no ill effect to him. It looked like they were saying that they tried making the argument, see, when he was sick before, nothing bad happened. And the defense was like, see, before he pretended to be sick too. And if nothing happened, why should a cop now believe he's being reasonable in his statements? So it was actually a pretty interesting, flip on the prosecution that they walked right into. Watching the prosecution so far, I'm surprised you have that these left-wing outlets can even pretend they're doing well. They had some good days. They've
initially at the beginning when the judge allowed for a week of people to just testify about how horrible it was to watch. Like, yeah, they were doing decently, but then.
But many of their witnesses have said things that you're like, that was a defense witness, right? But it
right.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. The prosecution had only, I think, like 1 or 2 real good days.
Yeah.
And that was just in the last week on like Thursday and Friday, where they got the experts to say, Chauvin killed him. He shouldn't have used this force. And then on cross from the defense, they were like, and it wasn't really good for the defense. And so some of the analysis is basically that Nelson seems to be tired. There's like multiple prosecutors and only one, I think one defense attorney. But for the most part, the state's witnesses have constantly said things where you're like, what? Mm-hmm.
Introducing doubt on their own. The
Right.
prosecution's it's so bad that you think that they just didn't even do prep. I've been involved in depositions in court cases. The lawyers sit down with you for days. They ask you all of the questions in the order they're going to ask you the questions. They basically give you a flippin' script.
And then they have another lawyer cross-examine you as if they were the opposition counsel.
So either they're arrogant, they didn't do the prep. That must be it, right? They just didn't do the prep.
Or they don't want Chauvin to go to jail because.
So the prosecution is what's the word when you screw up
And
on purpose?
sabotaging
Throwing
their
the
own-
fight?
The
sabotaging.
prosecution throwing the fight?
I don't know if they're throwing the fight. I think they just don't have a case.
That would be noble.
I don't think they're throwing the fight.
Throw the
I've
fight.
mentioned it before. Like, what if they're actually just flubbing this? But the reality is, they're doing the best they can. There's no case.
There's no
Chauvin
case.
should not have been charged.
Not at all.
Manslaughter is the only reasonable charge in the death of George Floyd. Only reasonable, because it's an argument about whether or not his training when he was negligent in his use of force.
And he wasn't. So he should be acquitted even on manslaughter.
Exactly.
This whole thing is a freaking joke. This is a scumbag doing scumbag things who died doing scumbag things under the control of a cop doing the cop things that he was trained to do.
Maybe, but you don't know. I mean, he did have his knee on his neck.
No,
I mean,
that's
I
not.
know. on his back,
the
but it looked like he
testimony
had both.
is shown that it wasn't on his
Well,
neck.
it
It
was-
didn't.
hold on.
Cut off
It
his
showed that it
cardboard-
was on his back, but it might have also been on his neck.
The
I mean, there was
testimony
video.
has shown that the knee wasn't consistently on the
Right,
neck and moved
consistent.
back and forth.
Consistently, right.
Which means this is where I guess the state was forced to change their argument, because without consistent pressure on the neck, the argument of cutting off blood flow made no sense because Chauvin's knee moved several times. Mm-hmm. So, okay, well, here's how he killed him. If the state can't tell me definitive, if the state came out and said, this man pulled a gun on video, fired it, the bullet went in the guy died, I'd be like, okay, that's their case, and I saw the evidence. Now they're like, we think this is what killed him. Was it that? Well, actually, his knee moved. So it wasn't that, but maybe it was this. Bro, get your story straight. Why don't you come back after you figured out exactly what caused this guy to die, instead of giving me a 30-day trial where we argue about what actually killed the man? If you don't know, how do you bring charges claiming someone did it? That's what's crazy. And again, they won't give immunity to Maurice Lester Hall because they're probably going to charge him. He's the one who did it, right?
You know, one of the things that bothers me, yes, I think you are right, is that there's this desire to win in court. Like it's the prosecution versus the defense, and they both want to win when what they should both be doing is getting to the bottom of the situation and trying to bring justice regardless of who was right and who was wrong. If the prosecution finds out that the guy wasn't guilty, stop the case.
Yes.
Stop.
This is what really bothers me watching Law and Order. You guys watch Law and Order?
Yeah.
In the criminal justice system.
Yes. The people are represented by two equal, but whatever. It's different. It's annoying when there have been some episodes where Jack, the prosecutor in the OG Law and Order, defies the DA and dropped the case, and he purposefully threw a case against. There's this woman, and she burned her building down, killed her son. And she did it because she was suicidal and desperate, and her son was having a seizure, and she thought he died. And so he was ordered to get her on murder charges, and he decided to go for an extreme charge that wouldn't fly, that the jury would not rule on. And he defied her because he knew it wasn't justice. But that's TV. In reality, the prosecutor is like, I'll say whatever I have to say to get my case.
Yes.
We have politics in play, and Chauvin should go to prison for the rest of his life, even though any reasonable person is going to look at this and be like, maybe you need to reform the police department. Maybe you should stop training people to do this.
Well, look, maybe he was overcharged. I don't know the details. Was the person who decided to charge him the same person who's prosecuting the case? Not really that relevant, but
There's multiple prosecutors.
Interesting question. But like in a decent world, without the cultural and political backdrop to this case, then what's happening is exactly what we want to have happen. Somebody dies, cop was involved, we do an investigation, and at the end of the day, we're like, cop was fine. That's what we want in our world. But the problem is the cultural and political backdrop is such that we know that justice, isn't that funny that these people say they're after justice? Mm-hmm. If justice prevails, well, goodbye Minneapolis.